me just to share with you the last few thoughts on leadership, and then we're going to open up to Q&A, whatever is there. So I'll just do a quick, that's my family. I don't know if the screen is fine. Do you guys see it? Let me do this.
There we go, better.
Right. So that's just my beautiful wife and my two sons. Lucas, 8 years old, and Jesse is 15 years old. And really honored by God just to, I think my wife, without my wife, I don't know if I would still be in ministry today. You know, she has not just been a great wife. She's been a voice of the Holy Spirit. She's been God's voice. She's been my conscience voice. And she's really helped me to stay the course in many times. She's taught me much about relationships. She's taught me much about just loving Jesus and being just sincere. And I think our families are very much part of everything we speak about tonight. So let me, if you look at leadership and the leadership growth path, I'm not going to so much take us into the practical of a leadership growth path, but speaking about the intentionality with people. Friends, when we stand on the stage on Sundays, what do you see? You see a crowd that's going to respond to your sermon, or do you see the potential of people that are called by God, saved by God for the purpose of God, and trying to get them into that? As June spoke about it, identifying, instruct, impart, and in turn, you know, those people. These are people that God entrusts to us on a weekly, on a daily basis, and separate times. And some of those people are with us for a long time. Some of those people are only there for a little bit. But are we intentional with people and thinking about people? So I want to touch on three major questions: why leadership, what leadership, and how leadership. Why leadership? Matthew 22, verse 37 to 38. This is my motivation for leadership. Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. And there's the first and greatest commandment. And then the second is like it: love your neighbor as yourself. And all the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. I want to remind us as leaders, as we go from here, the essence of leadership is basically two things. We love God and we love people. If it's about God and it's about people. So we say, when we talk about leadership, and what leadership about? Well, leadership is about loving God and loving people. The moment we love no more God and we don't love people, there is no leadership need. If we love God and we do things, how would it affect you and me if every decision and every way we treat people is affected by the fact that you and I love God? How will it affect our leadership style? What will we do different because we love God? That's why we do it. It's not because we prefer. And the second of it is, how do we effectively love people, and what we do with people, and how we lead people, and how we think, how do we want to be led? Do we lead in that way? Loving God and loving people, I believe, is at the core of leadership. And when we lose it, I always say to people in ministry, why do we want to be in ministry? Why do you want to be an evangelist? Why do you want to be an apostle? Why do you want to be a whatever? Why do you want to be a preacher? Why do you want to teach? Why do you want to lead worship? If it's not loving God, it's not loving people, there's no need for those gifts. At the core of leadership is loving God and loving people. I want to take us to a few definitions that Dr. Maxwell, everybody knows, is everything rises and falls on leadership. That's a great slogan. But friends, that is the reality. If you look at governments, if you look at companies, if you look at everything, anything in the world, it is dependent on leadership. The Bono Group spoke about, you know, George Bono says you can overcome many differences in the church ministry and organization, but you cannot compensate for the lack of good leadership. Nothing will cripple or even destroy a church more completely than the absence of effective leadership. Leadership is fundamental. Stetson and Dodson said the following in a research on comeback churches. They basically did a lot of research on churches and why churches are declining, and the churches who actually recovered from declining, what was the reason? And this is what they said. Research churches that reversed the trend towards serious decline. Unsurprisingly, the authors discovered that among 324 comeback churches, they studied the most influential factor in the churches was the revitalization of leadership. It comes back to leadership. Dr. Howard Hendricks said, the greatest need in a church around the world is quality leadership at every level. Right leaders in the right positions. The right leaders lead whatever you lead, whatever needs to be led, but the right people leading. So what are kind of leaders we're looking at? Where do we find them? Now, June already shared the scripture, but I'm going to give you a different angle on the scripture, because we decided on this scripture that we gave is really a fundamental scripture for some leadership principles. So I'm just going to go through it, and June focused on the same scripture. Moses' father-in-law spoke to him, what you're doing is not good. And he said, you're going to wear yourself out because it's too heavy for you. You are not able to do this alone. Then he said, now obey my voice and I will give you advice. And God will be with you, and you shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God. And you shall warn them about the statutes and the laws and make them known the way in which they must walk and what they must do. Moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate the bribe, and place such men over people as chiefs of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. So what's the first leadership lesson? What you're doing is not good. Unless as a leader, you don't come to the conviction of what you're doing is not good, you're going to keep on doing it as if it's good. We're not going to change things if we as leaders don't come to the place and realize lone rangers leadership is not good. What is the change? What was the challenge that Moses' father-in-law put to him? It's we, not me. It's we, not me. Moses, you cannot do this alone. You're going to burn out. It's too heavy. Don't do this alone. Overconfidence in self-ability will always disempower the potential of others. When we get overconfident that we can do it, I can't give it to this guy because he can't do it. The reality is, none of us would have ever been able to do anything unless someone entrusted us. I mean, imagine this. God himself entrusted to Adam and Eve, human beings, the creation that he made. Was that because they were totally able to lead everything? God himself entrusts people. Friends, we have to take a chance on people. We have to believe in people. But if we do it alone, then we still keep on ministering. And one of the barriers, which Pierre asked, I believe one of the biggest barriers in the church is we cultivate a philosophy of me ministry, me leadership. And it's maybe not just one leader, but we raise up leaders who think me, not we. And if we don't start to think we, why would I keep to me? Because there's a blind spot that I think I am the full package and I can do all of everything. The moment we realize, I believe that strong leadership is always dependent on understanding our weaknesses. Strong team dynamics is understanding our weaknesses. When you really know that you're weak in another area, you can sincerely celebrate the strength of someone else. The second thing we see from this passage, teach them the statutes and the laws. Leaders, if we want to raise leaders, we have to be willing and we have to put the time aside to teach people the statutes and the laws. We have to teach people the truth. We have to lay foundations and we have to make known to them the way and the will of God so that they can walk in it. We can't expect, it's amazing when we plant a church, I've seen this many times, and we're so excited when 20 church leaders from other churches join us. That's great, but they were raised somewhere else. And if they join us, it's great, but you don't know really what are the foundations in those lives. It's important that you and I take the time to spend with people and teach them the ways and walk with them and help them to understand the world. Because the more time we spend with people, the more we get to know people. The more we get to know people, the more we trust people. The more there's trust, the healthier the team is. If we rush into leadership without foundations, we end up in division. We have to spend time with leaders. We need leaders who follow God first. You and I, do we follow the truth? Do we walk in the way? And do we walk in the will of God? We see another lesson here. Look for able men from among people. Now here's the first thing, able men. I think Gilbert spoke about faith. Now that's in our trainings. What is faith? Faithful people, available people, involved people, teachable people, and humble people. As my wife and I was talking this afternoon, and we're talking about just leadership, she alluded to the fact that it's amazing how many times myself and Renee have made the mistake because people walk into our church and already in society, they have some influence. And then we think because they have some influence, they're great leaders, let's walk with them. And we have seen it time and time again that many of those people, not all, but many of those people, they consume so much time and energy, but they end up never become the leaders that they actually could be. And then sometimes, and I'm going to share with you, teach me later tonight, you walk with people that you don't know, and you don't even see, you assume, they're unassumed leaders. And as you walk with them, they actually become great kingdom leaders because of their humility, their availability, their involvement. Friends, you can have the greatest influencer walk into your church. If he's not faithful, you're not going to raise him. If he's not available to the kingdom and to be discipled, to be walked with, he's not going to be raised. Look for available people, not just people with some stature or what. Are they available? Are they involved? Do they pitch up for meetings? Do they come to these? Are they committed to the small group? Do they come to church? Are they putting up their hand to serve? Look for teachable people. Are they humble people, teachable, open? I remember many years, a lady came to our church and she said to me, she believes she should be part of our church. And I was excited about it. So I kind of encouraged her I called another lady and I said, listen, she wants to be part of our church. Would you have coffee with her? Now, the other lady was a leader in our church. She knew exactly what that coffee means. That coffee means an introduction to Connect Group. So she invited her to the Connect Group. She opened up the one-to-one booklet and she sat down. 2 weeks later, the same lady came to me and said, you know what? Thank you for this lady who wants to spend time with me through this basic book. But I'm already beyond this. I know these foundations. I don't want her to waste time with me. And I looked at her and said, let's take the little booklet that is this basic booklet. Explain to me Lordship. I asked her, have you ever led somebody to Christ? She says, never. I said, have you ever, and I started to take some of the basic foundations. I said, you know what's the problem? The problem is not the basis of the foundation. The problem is your perspective and your teachability. If you've never led someone to Christ, that is a basic. See, we want to help people to be faithful, available, involved, teachable, and humble. People with callings, they understand their calling, competency. They have a chemistry with the team, and they have the capacity to be involved. Now, here's one of the biggest questions. Where do we get these people? You know what? You go to an agency that hires people, and you ask them for a certain type of person that they need to go and find somewhere else, because from the 100 in front of you, there's none. And then you hire that person, and the person you've just hired is a clear communication that everybody in front of you are disqualified. Friends, I'm not saying we can't hire people from outside. Moses, their father-in-law, said to him, where do you find these men? You find them from your people. Your best leaders are sitting in front of your eyes. Our best leaders are not, people say, Phil, but you guys have great leaders and sometimes in church. I said, yes. When I came to Pretorius, they arrived at our door. They were all sorted out. They were all kind of okay, already married, had no problems, no challenges. And we were just lucky. I hope you're lucky when you plant your church. No, friends, we work with people. We have to be learning ourselves. One of the biggest challenges in leadership was me, Phillip. Can I grow to grow leaders? Can I change to involve leaders? Can I become secure and face my insecurities? Leaders, there's not one of us on this call that don't have insecurities. We have them. My wife makes me insecure. I mean, Roger, Simon makes me insecure. People around me makes me insecure. There's so many issues, things that I face, but do I face it? You know, are we willing to work as leaders and grow ourselves so that we can raise people from among us? Your best leaders are sitting right in front of your eyes. Your best leaders, when you're in the pulpit, open up your eyes on Sunday and ask God, show me who's sitting in front of my eyes. Those people you disciple and you walk with, why not believe in them that they can become what God has called them to be? We are not a hiring agency. We are a discipling, the equipping and empowering family. That's who we are. If you look at Exodus 18, verse, the last verse is, and Moses listened. What a key. Wow. Moses listened to his father-in-law. Now, if you want to have a moment of a little bit tension, father-in-law telling you to do something. And Moses listened. Leaders, we'll do well if we listen. If we can't listen anymore, why should people listen to us? If we can't take input, why give input? If we can't be led, why lead? If we can't, humble ourselves, if we can't be teachable, we need to be. The best way we raise leaders is not the books we read. It's not the courses we attend. It's the lifestyle we live. It's the way we treat people when we're away from this moment. It's the way you walk into your team, the way you are vulnerable to your team, the way you say sorry to your team, the way you say to your team, listen, I want you to be involved and start to grow your team to a place where there's trust. Where there's trust, there's allowance for conflict and unfiltered conversations. Out of unfiltered conversations, people start to buy in. Out of buy-in, you get commitment. Out of commitment, you get results. It's important that we allow people to become themselves and speak openly and grow to the place where we allow others to add to the momentum and the clarity of a team. Moses listened to input and are willing to be led. Empower other people to lead alongside us. That's what God is calling us. What was the result? So it will be easier for you. I mean, ministry is tough. I tell you, ministry's got challenges. Ministry, there's a weight, there's a loneliness. What is the answer to that loneliness? The weight, the challenges, the difficulty. Build healthy teams. Don't lead alone. Raise leaders. It will be easier then. And then he says, if you do this, God will direct you. How will God direct you? You'll be able to endure, and all the people also will go to their own place in peace. And June spoke about that. But how does God direct us? When we build teams. Now think about this. I believe, and I've seen this, face any difficulty in business, face difficulty in a church world. How do you solve it? Get more minds in a room than your own and sit around it and talk. The moment we build team, there's collaboration, there's buy-in, it's not just the same gifts and with the same personalities, because then we are limited. It's not the same age, it's not the same cultures, it's not the same genders. We have to start to allow younger people to be involved, people from different genders, people from different generations, different cultures. The more we allow team dynamic to kick in, the more we'll see the difficulties can find solutions because of effective team leadership. I want to just lay this foundation and the God factor of leadership. Jeremiah 1 verse 5. Before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. Here's the God factor. God forms. People belong to God, not to us. A leader who assumes ownership of people risks always control and abuse. We don't own people. Imagine this. We're going to pitch up you're a groomsman, and you pitch up at you're being asked to be the groomsman. And you get to the funeral, the wedding, and you kind of think it's your wedding. No, it's not your wedding, it's somebody else's wedding. And when you treat the bride, treat with respect, because it's not our bride. Friends, every person we walk with is Jesus' bride. They belong to Jesus. We have to treat them as Jesus' bride. And as we walk with people, treat them like that. They belong to God. They are designed by God for God's purposes. So what is leadership? Leadership is not just to use people to get a vision done. True leadership is to understand they are designed by God and gifted by God to walk together in God's purposes. I absolutely believe it's not individualism. I believe when we understand the purpose of God, it's a me to we. But every single little part of the body, Jesus designed, God designed, so that as we disciple him, it's amazing how they start to fit together like a beautiful tapestry, a beautiful body that start to function together. Now we're going to get now how we get there. God consecrates, God calls them, and God appoints, God assigns to them. What is the people factor? But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people belonging possession of God, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, now you are God's people. Once you were not received mercy, now you've received mercy. What is the people factor? We need to help people to understand they are chosen by God. It's God who chose us. We don't choose God. We need to, there's a plan, there's a God who chose you. He chose you to be a royal priesthood. If we help people that they start to worship God themselves, we want to raise leaders and people of influence. But at the core of that is worshiping Jesus. They are called to proclaim they have a voice. Let's help them develop their voice. Let's help them to have a voice. But that voice must then be discipled in from a me to a we, from a eye, an ear to a body. See, friends, if you walk into your home one day and your daughter runs up to you and says, yes, brother's eye, and the blood is dripping from her hand and, you know, everything is hanging from her hand, you're going to kind of, you know, wow, that's great. Where's your brother? Is your brother okay? No, you're not going to act like that. You're going to go into a panic attack. Where is your brother? Is he dead? Why would you act like that? Because an eye is not supposed to be in the hand. Oh yeah, it's a beautiful eye, powerful eye. The eye can see far, I know. But if that eye is not plugged into a bigger body, the eye is dead. The eye is useless. The eye is ineffective. If we don't help people in discipleship, if we don't help people, if we don't lay a foundation where I am crucified, I no longer live, we will never have healthy leadership. If we raise up a lot of eyes, we don't have strong leadership. We have just a lot of individuals who all fight for the power. They fight for the position. And if their name is not shout, I want everybody to shout my name. If their names are not shout, they get offended. They move on to the next. Friends, if the danger and the dysfunction we see on leadership always comes back to the foundations we have laid or not laid. A person to become a people, to grow from me to we. What is leadership? We see different definitions. Leadership is influence. The ability of one person to influence others. Where John Maxwell says leadership is influence. The art of getting things done through other people. Now that's great, but if we don't have a godly understanding, we could use this definition and actually use people. I find this definition to be beautiful. The central task of leadership is influencing God's people towards God's purposes. Robert Clinton, from his book, The Making of a Leader. In simple terms, leadership is moving people, God's people, onto God's agenda. Imagine every businessman, every businesswoman are moving onto God's agenda. Oh yeah, but business and ministry is separated. It's only separated because our theology is separated. No, there's no separation. Every single born-again believer are called by God for the purpose of God. It's God's agenda, no man's agenda. It's God's agenda. Oh, but I'm a Christian businessman. That's awesome. So you must be about Christ's mission. Because how can you, Christian businessman means you're a follower of Christ and Christ is Lord. And his purposes supersede every single agenda we have. We have to help people to come in unity with God's purposes and what God has on earth for us. I'm going to jump just to a basic thing, and because of time, I'm just going to help us here to understand a basic thing when we disciple people. I want to speak on general call versus specific call when it comes to leadership. And I've spoken at some schools about this, but think about this. What is general and what is specific? So here's a few examples. Are all people called to be prophets? No. Carol, you're a prophetess, okay? But not all people are prophets. Evangelists, Kemba's an evangelist. Are all people evangelists? No. Are all people called to be doctors? No. Are all people called to be pro sports people? No. Are all people called, Christians, called to be holy? Yes. Are all people called to be obedient? Yes. Are all called people to be loving? Yes. Are all people called to be accountable? Yes. You see the difference between general call and specific call. So here's a question. Have you ever heard of any pastor or CEO that fell because they are the CEO? Which means if you become a CEO, you must fall. No. Have you ever heard of a pastor who fell because they're the pastor? No. You never hear people fall because of the specific. They always fall because they neglect the general call. They're no more obedient. They're no more holy. They're no more loving. They're no more truthful. They're no more accountable. They're no more in faith. They're no more fruitful. Friends, if the general is what breaks us, why do we idolize the specific? If we say we want to raise young people, raise people, do we focus only on the specific and call that? Or do we raise the general in people's lives? What makes us stand? It's not the specific, it's the general. Yes, the general, it's a specific call, it's a function. But the general is the foundation. If we say we want to raise leaders, we have to lay a solid foundation in people's lives so that they can stand. Focusing on what is important. So what is the main thing here? We need to develop a leadership philosophy that the specific is a servant of the general, and the general is not a servant of the specific. If you walk into a church and they identify immediately, that's the prophet, that's the evangelist, that's the apostle, that's the teacher. But the church is so unholy, ungodly. I mean, they don't even, they're rude, they're stingy. You can ask yourself, what are the leaders doing here? Imagine you walk into a church, you don't even know who leads it, but the people are holy, loving Jesus, humble. You can ask yourself, who's leading this? Friends, the job of leadership is not to exalt the specific. The job of the fivefold gifts is to equip the saints, is to raise the saints. The moment we change our philosophy, we will see more leaders coming from us. The more we start to, how do we raise people? And not how do people raise us? If we build on the pulpit, we have to use people. If we build with the pulpit, we will raise people. We don't build on the gifts, we build with the gifts. The gifts are a servant of raising the people to become a holy priesthood, a holy people that God has called for holy purposes. One of the two of the general things that we sometimes neglect is it a general call or specific call to be a fisher of man. You hear so many Christians, oh, you need to reach people, lead people to Christ. And immediately their answer is, no, I'm not an evangelist. I know that. That's why I'm saying you should be fishing for people. See, an evangelist equips people. He has an extra gift on his life to equip people. To do what? So that they can evangelize. Are we all called to make disciples? Well, if you say yes, these are two general calls. So why do we neglect them and think we're going to make it in a specific? We just said, if you neglect obedience, you neglect holiness, you neglect truthfulness, accountability, you're not going to make it in your specific call. It's time that we believe we cannot put people on stages unless they are disciples of Jesus, unless they make disciples. I mean, how can you walk into a place where let's worship Jesus, or let's, you know, and the foundations of the general is not in place? Friends, I want to ask a few people that I've asked to share a few testimonies. And what I want to do is, Gilbert said last night, the quality of leaders we develop is directly proportional to the quality of disciples we make. Making disciples is raising leaders. Making disciples is raising leaders. Without making disciples, we will not raise leaders. The lack of discipleship will always result in the lack of leadership. I'm going to ask Carol, if you can unmute yourself. Why don't you share with us, just in short, your testimony, just what I've asked you to share with us. Thanks, Carol.
Thanks, Phil. So you asked me to share about someone that I have discipled who has become a leader, and I have two examples that I think are illustrative of the points you're making. The first one was actually a woman that Roger introduced me to, Pastor Roger introduced me to. And she had been Muslim, but she had recently had an encounter with Christ. And I began taking her through the one-to-one. This is about 7 years ago, I think, 10 years ago, actually. And she, on the first day, what was profound for me is on the first day, when we went through the Who is God chapter, she for the first time understood the encounter she'd had with Christ and gave her life to the Lord. So she'd had this experience, but she'd never really understood salvation. And she gave her life to the Lord. We went through the one-to-one, and all the foundations were in place. She came to me with strong leadership gifts anyway. You know, they were innate in her. But over time, as we worked together, shortly after we did the one-to-one, I did the one-to-one with her, she immediately started a one-to-one discipleship group on UJ Kingsway campus, began discipling girls. It was that typical thing. She was, you know, I just kept one page ahead of her, and she just followed exactly what I did. She started a number of discipleship groups. Those people started discipleship groups. So very fruitful, very quickly. The astounding thing about her is that shortly after that, I started to give her certain responsibilities, and she just grew. She now leads one of the departments, one of the biggest departments in our congregation. She's one of the elders in our congregation. But at the same time, as she was faithful with the discipleship, it's what allowed her leadership gift to grow and to kind of get the organizational skill from within the church as she was able to. But at the same time, she just has had amazing favor in certain circles. She's in the law profession, but recently she was arguing in Parliament for electoral reform, and just I see her in the future as being significantly influential in this political sphere. So just an example of someone who just really grasped the foundations and then just did the basics over and over, and it developed that leadership gift within her. One of the girls that she discipled in the early days now heads up another one of our departments in our congregation, and is also extremely faithful in discipleship. So it's fruit bearing fruit, which is so lovely to see. The other girl that I can think of.
Sorry. I know, I mean, I'm going to ask just maybe the one story. I asked for two for you.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah,
Done.
but I know our
Done.
time is actually, but Dr. June did well. I'm going to ask Raj, can you share one of your stories?
I can share so many stories. I want to share one that will hopefully give hope to people in terms of their children. With my sons, James and Sean, what I see in them is that they are disciples who make disciples. And I want to say to us that we never need to sacrifice our family on the altar of ministry. And, you know, I hear testimonies, I get feedback from people, and they truly have become arrows that they are touching people that I could never touch. So we make disciples of people that we evangelize, and we make disciples of our children who in turn make disciples. I could tell a lot more stories about what James is doing with the City Bowl Church plant and Sean on campus ministry. But suffice to say, they are reaching and touching people and leading people to the Lord that I could never do. And I give God all the glory and honor for that.
Thanks, Rog. Appreciate it. Marianne.
Phil, yeah, so great to share one of my testimonies. It's really blessed my heart and our church, and I think even this movement. About 16 years ago, I went into a res on campus and met a young lady who at that time was church hopping. She loved Jesus but had no foundations, wasn't established in spiritual family, and just really pursued a relationship with her, got to know her, and over time just started to disciple her. And just saw her just hungry for the Lord, hungry to step into what God had for her. And over time, saw her being raised up as a leader, taking responsibility, starting to walk with others. And in the early years, didn't know specifically that there was a full-time ministry. It wasn't that was apparent, but really as she's been faithful and as she's followed Jesus and as we've walked with her and mentored her, just seen Delian step more and more into God's call on her life, to the point where she was one of our campus leaders for many years and now has been our campus pastor here in Stellenbosch for the last 10 years, and just incredibly fruitful, faithful to make disciples, has just really walked with hundreds of leaders, raised leaders over the years. And that's just also her living out and being faithful to make disciples. One of the beautiful stories was one of the girls she then walked with while she was a student and someone that she mentored. She also gave her the value of discipleship and laying foundations and intentionally walking with people. And that was Lene, who then when she left Stellenbosch went to Cape Town. And she immediately was like, I want to start a connect group. I want to make disciples. I want to reach people. And that connect group was the connect group that started really some of our thoughts and processes about starting the Every Nation City Bowl Church, which is a thriving church today. And that was because Delian also went and raised up others, trained people in making disciples, and she went out and Lene's lived it, and just the fruit is there. So yeah, I just honor Delian as well for following Jesus and raising others that are still making disciples.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. Can I ask you all, I know we are on the time, but can you give us another just 10 minutes so we conclude the session properly? I want to ask Simon, if you have to go, it's fine, but we really want to just conclude well here. I'm going to ask Simon just to share with us. Simon, I'm putting up your picture here. If you can share with us, my friend.
Great. Thanks, Phil. I'll be very short. I thought of just two families and that we've journeyed with in the recent past, and how they've actually embraced the general call and the specific call, the way that you've described it so well, Phil. If you look at these pictures here, you see Champ and Lerato with their two beautiful daughters. Champ was discipled on campus, Vets campus, many years ago. We journeyed with him, had a privilege of doing their wedding 10 years ago, and continue to journey with them. Champ, at some point as a CA, started a connect group at one of the big 5 companies, and discipling men and women to the point that he got his boss to come to his connect group. He was on fire for Jesus. Today, Champ runs his own company. He's the founding CEO of TechVest Group together with Lerato, and they are running a group at their business. They continue to disciple people even in their business. Currently, Champ at a local church, embracing also part of the specific call. He is a chair of our financial advisory board. So blessed to journey with this couple. Petri Kleinskelt, he's on the call as we speak. More recently, I started working with Petri, and Lindy, my wife, is discipling Linda, Petri's wife. Petri, we've been in a connect group together. I started seeing him starting to share the gospel with people in his workplace. He's the financial director, you can also say CFO, of Canon South Africa, and he's not allowing himself, being the financial director, to be stopped from sharing the gospel with people around him. Most recently, he was doing the AFS annual financial report to the entire company. And at the end of the session, he shared a quote by Tim Keller that we have on our church wall. And that started spiritual conversations with a number of people that he works with. So Petri, so proud of you. He's doing Leadership 115 now, as you've seen in Dr. June Escoso. What they call Leadership 113 is Leadership 115 before jumping into Leadership 215. See him embracing the specific call and the general call. I'll pause there.
Thank you, Simon. Appreciate that. I want to share with you brief, just one or two stories. On the left-hand side is myself and Ruan Sarfontein. I arrived in Stellenbosch in 2000, and when I arrived, they assigned to me this one guy who gave his life to Jesus the previous weekend. And they said, please go follow this guy, call this guy. And when I got there, Ruan was still smoking dacha. We were sitting down and said, Ruan, do you have friends? And Ruan called 3 friends together in his race when he started to walk: Peter Morgan, Craig Fredericks, and Warren. Peter Morgan is an elder in the Stellenbosch Church today. Craig Fredericks, Dr. Craig, is a medical doctor today. He's running a massive organization that takes medicine and things into different difficult places. And Warren is a leader in the Stellenbosch Church today. Ruan leads the Junction Church today. They were students back in the days. Ruan went to Patria and he met this man, Raymond, started to disciple Raymond. Raymond is now the youth leader. He's now the national director of our youth ministry today. Where do leaders come from? They come from disciples. I'll share with you another story. I had a small group in Tshwane, and there was 4 people. 2 of them are not in our church anymore. They were very strong when we started to disciple them. They were very opinionated. They were already in ministry and doing ministry. Warren here with a beard was very shy, very held back, very kind of unassuming. I sat with Warren one day and I said, can we have coffee afterwards? And I talked to him and said, Warren, and I shared the gospel and said, have you ever given your life to Christ? He's full. I've never even understood it. I've never prayed the salvation prayer ever in my life. I had the privilege of leading him to Christ in a coffee shop. Warren gave his life to Jesus, very unassuming. Warren went home, took his gardener, Ben, standing next to him. He led Ben to Christ and he started to disciple Ben. So here's what happened with Ben's life. Ben started to disciple, Wellington. Wellington. And there's all the names: Immersion, Tope, Smart, Peter, Brian, White. From that, 1 Nigerian, 2 Malawians, 4 Zimbabweans, 6 South Africans. You go back to Warren's life. Warren got saved in 2013. He started to disciple in 2016, his gardener. He's still today discipling people that are discipling people. And Ben is now he's in the school, being trained to become a campus leader in Malawi, being sent back to Malawi. Where do our leaders come from? They don't come from leadership trainings first. They come from disciples we make. The best leaders are sitting in front of our noses. Friends, I end off with this picture. Pastor June showed you their leadership picture. Here's our leadership picture in South Africa. We make disciples, we engage, we empower, establish, equip, and empower. From that, how do you raise leaders? It's really, really simple. Make disciples. Help your disciples to make disciples. When your disciples make disciples, they actually have followers. Then train them how to lead those who make disciples better, that they can become leaders. And as they lead those who lead, they become better leaders. The best way we raise disciples, the first barrier to raising leaders, is help people to make disciples. If they make disciples, they have followers. Train them then to lead those followers well and help the followers to start to make disciples. When the followers start to make disciples and they become leaders, the leader becomes a leader of the leaders. Train them to lead the leaders well. Out of that comes your best leaders, your best preachers, your best evangelists, your best CEOs, your best doctors, your best engineers. The best people we can raise in our churches are the people sitting in front of our eyes. The best leaders we can raise is to tell every person who is in the specific, can we focus on the general and help you to be a Christian? I hope the last 2 nights did a little bit in your heart, inspired you, encouraged you, may we go from here with the following. Will you commit, first of all, as a leader, being a follower of Jesus yourself? Friends, we cannot fall out of the race. We cannot have testimonies of us falling out of the race. How do we avoid that? Stay humble, stay accountable. When you're in a bad place, ask somebody, speak to somebody, phone somebody. Don't stay there. We don't want to lose you. We want you to stay strong. The second thing you can do, would you commit to sow your life into others, even if your name is never shouted? Shout their name. Raise up others. Don't fight for your own calling. Fight for the calling of other people. Give over. Let's surrender. Don't be entitled. Can you commit to go from this place, get 2 names in your head, 2 names that you're going to intentionally, if it's more, great, but find 1 or 2 people you're going to start to empower, raise, and have a chance on them. Take a chance on them. And you know what? Let them make mistakes and have the mistakes on you, like your children will have mistakes on you. Can we be fathers, fathering and mothering leaders, not just leaders who lead? Can we be people who raise people? Equipment, friends, 250 people, 200, 300 people altogether was on this call. If all of us raise 1 leader, we have 600 leaders. If all 600 raise another leader next year, we have 1,200 leaders. June talks about 240 people identified. Oh, that's great. Friends, we can do that. Can every church leader raise another senior leader? Can every campus leader raise another campus leader? Can every youth leader raise another youth leader? Can we kind produce kind? The nations are waiting on us. Africa's open. I mean, Europe is open. What do we need? We need leaders. Where does it start? If there's one thing you cannot avoid not doing every week, is walking with your small group. Leaders, if you're too busy to commit to a small group, you're not raising leaders. You need to disciple people. From that discipleship, raise them to become the leaders. And those leaders, one day you'll look back and you'll sing the testimony. You'll see what God will do through amazing people that you thought when you disciple them, you didn't know who they are. If we do this, God will use us. The movement will affect the world. We believe in every one of you. We know that God has called you. You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood. Now we ask you, would you go and tell other people they are called, they are chosen? And as we raise people, let's get the eye back into the body. Let's get the ear back onto the head. Let's put people into body, into the right positions so that the body can function, not just the individual. We don't raise me's, we raise we's. We take me's and we help them to mature to become a we, but we don't reject the me's. We have to father the me's to become a we's so that we can become what God's called us to be.